This is a photo I took of the tallest mountain in the United States, Denali. It's also known as Mount McKinley. Its peak is more than 20,000 feet above sea level. In this video, I'm going to show you how, in 1995, you could most easily get close to Denali to photograph it. In July of 1995, I had just finished 2 adventures in Alaska, and I still had 2 days free before my flight back to California. If you're like me and find yourself with a couple of extra days to spend exploring Alaska, you think about making a trip to Denali National Park. Maybe the weather will be so good you can actually see the tallest mountain in the United States. But the weather is the key. Most of the time, Denali is covered with clouds and cannot be seen. I was trying to decide what to do as I drove into Fairbanks from McCarthy, and at the top of a hill I saw people parked. They were taking photos. I stopped, and there, 120 miles away, was Denali in all its evening glowing glory. A clear view, no clouds. So I changed course and started driving toward Denali National Park that night. Early the next morning, I continued. As I drove, I got a few glimpses of Denali, and it was still clear of clouds. As I drove through Healy, I saw a sign advertising Flightseeing. On an impulse, I drove 2 miles east to the Healy airport. There was a Flightseeing airplane just loading, and it had 1 empty seat. I grabbed my cameras and got in. As we flew, we started seeing more and more mountains and glaciers. I had to shoot out through a plexiglass window, so I didn't know how the video or the photos would turn out. We flew about 100 miles to get to Denali. When I looked down, I couldn't imagine anyone trying to explore this high, mountainous, glacier-pocked area. We got to Denali. It was towering above us. The pilot made only 1 turn to give each passenger a full view of this mountain, and the weather was still clear. Flying back to the airport, I began to consider, how was I going to get out to Wonder Lake in the national park? You see, Wonder Lake is the closest point that the park road gets to the mountain. Yet in 1995, no tour buses or private cars were allowed that far out on the road to Wonder Lake. Here's a map of Denali National Park, and here's the park entrance, and here's the road that goes out beyond Wonder Lake. And right here is the mountain called Denali. My guess is that most tourists who arrive at the Denali Park arrive by train and then are transferred to a park bus or a tour bus that takes them out into the park. The tour buses did not go as far as Wonder Lake. About as far as they went was a place called Eielson. The only way a normal person can get out as far as Wonder Lake is if they are going to be hiking or camping. Now, when I arrived at the park entrance, the Wonder Lake campground was already full and was going to be full the next day. However, the Park Service did have areas or units of land designated for hiking. Unit 42 had not been reserved, and I reserved Unit 42. It was located on the park road just beyond Wonder Lake. Campers are bussed out to these units or these areas in school buses. The school bus driver stopped if there was any interesting wildlife to view, but otherwise he just kept driving and didn't talk. Now, we did encounter some wildlife on this bus shuttle trip out to the end of the park road. These are mooses, or is it meese? I was dropped off on the boundary of Unit 42. My tent, sleeping bag, food, everything was in this red waterproof bag, kind of a backpack. Now, there were special rules I had to follow when I accepted the reservation for Unit 42. I had to agree to pitch my tent out of sight of any road and out of sight of any building. For my safety from grizzly bears, I was loaned a bear-proof food container. It was a cylinder with 2 screws that you use to take off the lid. Then this container had to be located at least 100 yards, that's the length of a football field, away from the tent. In addition, there could be no food or food smell in my tent. The place where I ate my food had to be at least 100 yards away from both my tent and the cylinder in which the food was stored, 3 corners of an equilateral triangle. That way, a grizzly bear was not supposed to associate my tent with food. Now, I had not expected the terrain in my unit of land, Unit 42, to be so covered with vegetation, so uneven to walk on, and so filled with marshy water, sort of bogs. To me, it was not a pleasant place for camping, or for hiking for that matter. In addition, there was a 200 to 400 foot high little hill between me and the Denali mountain. I had to climb up that hill anytime I wanted to take a look at Denali's status. Needless to say, the next morning I broke camp and caught the first shuttle bus back to the park entrance. However, at several stopping points, I had a nice photography view of Denali. And there were some interesting encounters with wildlife on the trip back. We saw a grizzly at a great distance. There were many encounters with caribou right next to the bus. We watched a pair of raptors trying to scare a fox away from a rabbit they'd killed. The action, I'm afraid, is too far away for you to see clearly here. At one point on the road going back, a caribou started walking in front of us, and we have no right to push the caribou out of the way, so we had quite a delay as we waited for the caribou to mosey along. He was kind of crawling as far as I was concerned. At the bus stop called Eielson, the clouds were almost gone, and I got some great shots of Denali. Our driver told me that we were very lucky that this had been an extremely bad year for weather and a bad year for viewing Denali. At the Eielson bus stop, we also observed cliff swallows, which had made nests under the roof overhang. They were flying back and forth to their nests in order to feed their young. I was really pretty beat when I got my gear off the school bus back at the park entrance. I returned the bear-proof food cylinder to a ranger. Now, I hope my description of this 2-day adventure may help you get some good views of Mount McKinley/Denali. But remember, most of the time, the tallest mountain in the United States is hidden behind clouds. Now, if it's important for you to see the mountain, please schedule your trip so you can spend many days in the area waiting for the weather to clear. Good luck.